This is one of the very recent results announced by Fermilab USA regarding a property measured on a fundamental particles known as a muon. So I like to discuss very briefly what is the exciting result announced by the Fermilab. What are the implications of the result? How that is going to be affect some of the understanding of the universe, and a brief discussion its result in cosmology in general. So the name of the talk I have given us Beyond the Fantastic Four. So let me begin the talk. We have four fundamental forces known to us so far, that are weak nuclear interaction or weak nuclear force, strong nuclear force, electromagnetic force, and the gravitational force. You know, thus these four forces are very vital in our everyday life. For example, weak interactions, even though we are not seeing the weak interaction in everyday life, but it has a very, very vital role in leading our life. If weak interactions is not there, you can imagine how the sun is really producing the energy. And we have to thank the weak interaction rate, such a rate that it is not exceeding certain rate. If it is exceeding certain rate, the sun would have been finished by the time. Other one is a strong interaction, which really bind the nucleus very strongly. And other one is the electromagnetic force, which we are experiencing in our everyday life. Even today's communication is possible because of the electromagnetic force. And other one is the gravitational force. The gravitational force is very, very important in our everyday life. Even for walking, without a gravitational force is difficult. For drinking a cup of water also, gravitational force is very, very essential. Physics normally list these are the four fundamental interactions of forces in nature. But people are pondering this question several years back. Are there any more interactions beyond these four interactions? Sometimes we heard about there are some invention or discovery, or some people claimed that they invented a new force or a fifth force in nature. Some claims sometimes come and goes, but there is no inclusive evidence so far the existence of the fifth force. But a very recent announcement came from the Fermi Lab exactly on April 7th. They announced the result, which is a property measured known as the magnetic moment of a fundamental particle known as a muon, which value is not agreeing with the theoretical prediction exactly in terms of the standard model of particles. This value is going beyond. This gives a very strong indication existence of a new particle or a new force. So this is giving certain clues whether there is the fifth force in nature or not. So in this talk, I'll give what is actually measured by the Fermi lab, what is the magnetic moment, why we are really worried about the so-called anomaly of the magnetic moment, which is deviating from the theoretically predicted value, how that can really affect the understanding the fundamental building blocks of the universe, whether it can give certain puzzles which are facing in universe or not. So let us begin to understand this one, starting the standard model. The standard model of particle, which is basically a model developed almost completely in 1970 to include the fundamental particles and the corresponding interactions among various force carriers. So according to standard model, you have six quarks, then six electrons, along with their antiparticles. Plus, we have a new particle also added to the standard model in 2012, which all of you have heard about. That's called Higgs bosons. Higgs boson also was initially was not a part of the standard model. They were trying to invent Higgs boson. Higgs boson is very much essential to answer the very deep question how certain particles are acquiring mass. The standard model also including so-called force carriers. Second standard model, the interactions between particles are happening by exchange of certain carrier of force. For example, in the electromagnetic case, the force carriers are called photons, which you have denoted here as a gamma. Weak interactions are mediated by so-called bosons, Z0 boson, W plus bosons, and W minus bosons. And strong interactions are mediated by what known as the force carriers or gluons. Of course, we can see that the standard model is still not complete because one of the very fundamental forces is not included in the standard model, which is gravity. If gravity also want to include it, we should include one more particle known as gravitons. But our today's story is not talking about how to include the gravitons. Even if you consider certain other properties of neutrinos, neutrino initially thought it was massless particle, and later it's confirmed that the neutrino can have some tiny mass. So the neutrino also different types are available. If you try to include neutrinos in the standard model, still there's a difficulty in including it. On the top of that one, the new findings coming from the Fermilab added to some more tension in the standard model. Now, according to the standard model, there is a fundamental particle called muon, which is supposed to be cousin of electron. The muon has almost the same property as that of the electron, except the mass is different. So let us look at some of the brief physical properties of muon, because today our talk is basically focused on the fundamental particles called muon. So muon was basically discovered in 1936, a famous physicist called Anderson and Henry Weinberg. Anderson also famous for the discovery of the positron, and very interestingly, the same positron is going to play a very, very key role in understanding the magnetic dipole moment of muon. We will see how that is going to be using it. Anderson initially thought that this was a particle and named as a mesotron. And some point of time, that point of time, it was thought that it was a particle predicted by Yukova. So some point of time, the particle also named as a Yukon. But later people identified that it was not the real particle predicted by Japanese scientist Yukawa. It is a new particle. So by observing the properties of the muon, which already mentioned as property, charge is same as that of electron, is a deflection found somewhere between protons and electron. Therefore, Anderson himself later named as a meso. And then that is means something in the middle between electron and proton. And later it is renamed as a muon. Actually, the muon was confirmed by later by Curry Street and E.C. Stephenson in 1937 by performing a famous experiment called the cloud chamber experiment. In olden days, the cloud chamber experiment was the very important tool to use to determine the particles and its trajectory sector. One interesting thing about the muon, that was the first particle, elementary particle, which basically discovered other than particles available in the atoms. Now let us briefly look at some physical properties of muon. I already mentioned that leptons belong to a family, muons belong to a family called the leptons. Its charge is same as that of electron. And interestingly, muon has no substructure. That means it is a fundamental particle, like compared to protons and neutrons. You can see that it has substructure in terms of quarks. Speak of neutron. spin of muon is half, and we can see that the mass of muon is almost 200 times more than the mass of electron. The mean lifetime of muon is 2.2 microseconds. Therefore, it may quickly decay into other particles. It has antiparticles, which antiparticle denote with the mu plus. So muon and mu minus, mu plus are the particles. And the current discussion we are going to focus on only based on the antiparticle of muons called mu plus. Now let us look at the source of muon in nature. Actually, the muon were discovered with the atmospheric experiment based on the cosmic radiation coming from the outer region of the space. When cosmic radiation also originates from sun also, there is cosmic radiation coming from various astrophysical sources also. These are high energetic particles. These high energetic particles actually come to Earth atmosphere, and that atmosphere contains a lot of molecules. So cosmic rays can interact with the molecules proton, and that can produce something called another fundamental particle called pion. The pion can decay into muons and neutrinos. Pi, there are two types of pions are there, pi plus and pi minus. Correspondingly, can decay into mu plus and mu minus muons. So interestingly, you can see that more than 10,000 muons each every square meter of Earth in a minute. So that means there are a lot of showering of the muons at the atmosphere region. But we have already found that as a lifetime is very, very small, therefore it may quickly decay into other particles. The decay of muons basically happen through an interaction called the weak nuclear interaction. If muons decay, for example, if you consider mu minus, it can decay into electron, anti-neutron of electron, and muon neutron. If mu plus is decay into positron, neutrino, and anti-neutron of muon. So the decay of the weak interaction of neutrons we have described in terms of the Feynman diagram. So this is the Feynman diagram which can describe the decay of, for example, we have taken the mu minus, which can decay into electron neutrino, is anti-neutrino, and muon neutrino. Sometimes its decay can happen with some other intermediate particle, for example, W minus boson. So that virtual particle later can be turned into positron and electron antiparticle neutrino. So this is the one example of the Feynman diagram of the muon weak interaction. So now let us focus on the magnetic dipole moment or magnetic moment of electron and muon. Actually, the magnetic moment played a very, very important role in the development of the standard model of particle physics. So let us first understand very naively what we mean by the magnetic moment, because ultimately we are going to measure the magnetic moment of muon. So magnetic moment of muon we are represented with a mu, which is a vector quantity. So it is actually a magnetic strength and orientation of a magnet or object that produces a magnetic field. For example, here I have represented a current carrying loop which is going to certain direction, which is not in this particular direction. So it will produce a magnetic field which can represent the down diagram. So it will produce corresponding magnetic moment. So magnetic moment can be also equally represented by another property called a magnet dipole. So magnet dipole means two poles are separated by a certain distance. So that's called dipole, magnet dipole. So magnetic moment can be equivalently understood in terms of the magnetic dipole, or sometimes we call some magnetic dipole moment. It is nothing, the distance multiplied by the two dipoles. Similar, one can also define the electric dipole, but here we are not interested in the electric dipole of the muon. We are only interested in the magnetic dipole of muon. Another important properties of these fundamental particles are not the spin. The spin, sometimes people are modeling like a wobbling of a top or spinning of top. Even though sometimes this model, people say that this is not a good analogy, but at some point of we can see that this analogy pretty will work to describe the spin. Spin is an internal angular momentum of fundamental particles. It is basically a quantum property of quantum nature of particles that we don't have a classical analog because it is coming from an internal property. So sometimes it is very, very convenient to model the spin and angular momentum of particle in terms of its rotations and in terms of a model called gyroscope. We know the what's a gyroscope used for. It is particularly used for determining the direction. It has its own a spin with respect to its own axis. So hereafter we are going to consider a gyroscope as a representation of a particle. For example, we consider this as an electron itself. So you can assume that electron is spinning around its own axis. So therefore, some properties you can easily describe it in terms of the gyroscopic factor called the G factor, which we are going to introduce very soon. Now, the existence of electron spin can be actually understand from Pauli's exclusion principle. Pauli's exclusion principle is actually initially put forward by Pauli to account for the electrons accommodation in an atom, because we know there are four quantum features or quantum numbers are there. So according to Pauli's exclusion principle, all particles cannot take the same quantum numbers. Therefore, the same electrons want to occupy the same orbital. At least one property must be different from other properties. So therefore, Pauli suggested another property called a spin. The spin can be different for different electron, even though it is orbiting the same orbit itself. The spin, the existence of the spin later verified the famous Gerlach experiment. Therefore, now we know that the spin is basically a quantum features, quantum property. It is not just an additional property added by hand. It is an intrinsic property of the particle itself. So now we had seen that the same particle can possess a magnetic dipole and it can also possess spin. The combination of the spin and a dipole or magnetic moment, which can leads to something like a tiny magnet. Therefore, the particles can be modeled as a small tiny magnet. Not a simple tiny magnet, it can be a rotating tiny magnet. Therefore, just for an understanding purpose, we can consider particles are just like a rotating tiny magnet. Because the spin and the charges that leads to a generation of the magnetic moment of particles. Therefore, essentially, we can model as a tiny rotating magnet. Now, let's consider putting this tiny magnet in an additional magnetic field. How it is going to behave. So, some of us already familiar that if you are putting a magnet in another additional magnetic field, it will try to orient in a direction according to the direction of the external magnetic field that we apply. So if you therefore put this magnet in an additional magnetic field, it tries to rotate in a certain fashion. That's because it is getting additional torque from the external magnetic field. As we know that the torque is responsible for pushing it to rotate it further. So therefore, these rotations or torque, which cause something called a precision of the spin around its axis. So this precision can be calculated. So more precisely, one can calculate what the amount of frequency of the precision frequency one can calculate. So this precision frequency, one can see that it is related to certain physical properties of the particle itself and also the external magnetic field which we apply. So therefore, the precision frequency that is represented by the spin precision frequency, say omega s, which is actually equal to the charge and times the strength of the magnetic field divided by 2 times the mass of the particle, where G is a factor. which is known as the gyromagnetic factor. This will tell how much the particle is really interacting with that given magnetic field. In other sense, we can measure the G factor, which can really tell about the precision or the strength of the particles interact with the magnetic field. So in other sense, practically if you measure the precision frequency, one can determine the G factor. So you can just use this formula because we know the charge of a particle, we know the mass of the particle, and we know the external magnetic field. From this, one can really estimate what the corresponding G factor. So that will tell how much amount of the precision. You will see that this is very, very vital and important to understand the muon, magnetic dipole moment. So we can actually now connect the magnetic moment we represented by its a vector, therefore we are writing as a mu L, but don't confuse with this mu itself, the notation of the muon itself. I am using the mu itself denoting the muon and a mu bar arrow, which is representing the magnetic moment of muon, of particle. So we can connect this one through its spin. Again, you can see that the gyromagnetic factor also appearing there. So here I have written a very general formula. Therefore, it is applicable to either electron or muon, etc. Actually, using the quantum ideas, Paul Dirac in 1928 predicted the value of the gyromagnetic factor G factor for spin half particle. We know that electrons are spin half particle, muon also spin half particle. So using the Dirac equation, which I have not written here, it is slightly complicated equation. If you try to solve the Dirac equations, ultimately one can predict the G factor. Theoretically, it is exactly equal to 2. Actually, Dirac predicted for any point particle, the G factor must be 2, especially if it has a spin half particle. So therefore, one can see what will be the G factor for the electron. The electron G factor also must be exactly 2. The measurement of the G factor basically starting from the measurement of the G factor of protons. This was done by Stern, his famous Stern-Gerlach experiment. In 1943, Stern measured the G factor for proton. And according to that prediction, the G factor of proton supposed to be different value. So what they measured later, Rabi also measured the G factor experiment, repeated, and confirmed that the G factor of the proton is slightly different from the predicted value. But this given very good indication that the proton initially thought as a single particle, it was not a composite particle. After the measurement of the G factor of proton, then it gave the clue that it must be composed of other fundamental particles. So now we know that proton is a composite particle, it composed of 2 upper quarks and 1 down quarks. So therefore, the deviation or the measurement of G factor can also tell whether the particle is a composite in nature or not, or as a single particle. So dramatically, then people try to measure the G factor of the electron to see whether electron G factor or is it a composite particle or not. So that pioneering experiment was done by Kush and Michael Holt. And they observed that the G factor of electrons, which is technically called a landed G factor, is a total G factor of the electron. As per the prediction of the Dirac, its value must be exactly 2. But on the contradictory, with a surprise, they observed that its values deviate from the 2. So initially people thought that that may probably some mistake in the measurements, but later further verified it that was one of the precise measurement done those days, and confirmed that the value of the electron G factor is deviating from the value of 2. Then the questions arise, why the value of the G factor of electron is deviating from the 2? Why is not in accordance with the prediction of the Dirac theory? Why it is not completely obeying that one? Is it composed of some even fundamental particles like protons? Later understood that it cannot be. It is not good that the electrons are composed of particles. Then what is the reason? Why the G factor of electron is deviating from the predicted value for Dirac? So since the value for predicted value deviated from the 2, and later people found a new term to understand the deviation from the magnetic dipole moment from the value of the 2. So that factor, what we are calling is an anomalous factor. And a factor added to the G factor, therefore one can measure so-called anomalous factor. So therefore such experiments are technically known as a G minus 2 experiment, because the expected value is 2, how much is deviating from the 2 value. Therefore all the such measurements known as the G minus 2 experiment. So A is not the anomalous factor. If you measure the A value, the anomalous magnetic dipole moment of that particle, if it is more than 0, then it indicates that G must be greater than 0. So why then in the case of the electron, the magnetic anomalies is greater than 2? Even though it is a very, very tiny number, which I have not written here, because I like to put the most recent value of that factor. What the measured by Kush and Foley have not shown here. That is now the historical importance, but the later we have a refined values. That's a look like it's a very, very tiny number. But look like that tiny number, sometimes we think what's so significant that a tiny number. But one thing what to keep in mind that these are the very precise measurement done in physics. There are several very good precise measurement done in physics. There is a very difficult to doubt that experiment by taking into account the systematic errors, all kind of errors what can take into consideration. Even then, that a tiny small factor will remain there. So that is really the question, the why electron magnetic dipole moment is more than 2. Can we answer that one? So are we forgetting anything? Or are we not including certain other physical properties added to the interaction of electron or not? So let us try to understand that one in the case of electron. For example, let us put the electron, which we are modeling as in terms of gyroscope. We are putting the electron in a magnetic field, then it is supposed to precise. It's supposed to rotate in a given magnetic field. When you are putting the magnetic field, sometimes experiments are doing in a vacuum condition. The vacuum conditions, when you put it there, we normally assume that there is nothing is there in the vacuum. The very true literal sense, people consider as a vacuum. But actually, the vacuum is not a real. According to the quantum field theory description, that is rooted from the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which we can discuss it a little bit later. So therefore, according to quantum field theory, the vacuums are not really vacuum. There can be certain particles can be created in pairs. One of them must be the particle, other one is the antiparticles. So the particles, antiparticles can be created and it can vanish. So this can particle creation, antiparticle creation can happen momentarily and can disappear. So it could be sometimes maybe positron and electron. Then it can be turned to a photon, or photons can appear and it can be again one. It can turn into positron and electron. Again, positron and electron can again come into photon. Sometimes it can be pi plus or pi minus. It can appear in pairs. Or other fundamental particles can also appear there. Or something else also can appear there. What are the possible comes from the standard model particles? Any one of them can be appear there. Even Higgs bosons can also appear there. So we don't know sometimes what are the additional particles or antiparticles appearing and disappearing in the vacuum. Because I already mentioned about quantum field theory, the particles are basically considered quantum oscillations. Each particle corresponding in oscillations. This oscillation has its own energy called a vacuum energy. This vacuum energy can really oscillate according to Heisenberg uncertainty principle. That is basically the root of the origin of the so-called the vacuum creation. So these are the basic course of virtual particle because these particles are creating and disappearing. It is something like it is pop in and pop out in a fraction of time, seconds. When these particles appearing, it can sometimes can interact with the electrons. So that can influence the spin of the electron. Therefore, it can slightly change the gyromagnetic factor of the electron. Because we know the electron has a mass and a charge, which is very much related to the frequency omega c, which is omega s, the frequency of the precision we already observed it. Therefore, the additional appearance of the particles can really give certain kind of additional value to the precision. So that precision value can really give us to the value that G can be more than 2. And we can really calculate this precisions in terms of the possible virtual particles appearing and disappearing. This is doing with the so-called very fundamental calculation, so-called quantum field theory calculations. So quantum field theory one can apply and one can really interpret and understand why the electron's magnetic moment or the G factor is more than 2. If this is happening in the case of electron, it should also can happen with the other particle also. We already mentioned muon, which are cousin of electron, which are the same spin and charge. Only difference that muons are 200 times, roughly 200 times more than mass of electron. Therefore, this dramatic feature should be much more visible in the case of muon compared to electron, because we can see the frequency of the precision omega s, which we mentioned, which is basically related to the mass of that particle. So the mass of the muons are 200 times more, then this effect must be much more prominent in the case of the muons. So people started searching about whether muon can also can exhibit similar kind of precision property. So according to Dirac prediction, the muon also should be G must be exactly 2, but it must be deviating if you consider in the case of the electron case. So first let us understand the deviation of the G value of the electron from the predicted value 2. So these corrections later people, I already mentioned that the particles are appearing and disappearing. So this can be understand something called quantum electrodynamics. So using quantum electrodynamics calculations, Julian Schiffner obtained a small number which is deviating from the 2, and this can be added to the factor 2. Therefore, it can understand how much is deviating from the factor 2. So quantum electrodynamics can also add to other kinds of interactions. Quantum electrodynamics, we know that electrons, muons, tau, gamma, all can be comes under the quantum electrodynamics combination. Here, for example, a Feynman diagram I have shown the interactions of electron and positron, which can give us to a photon. Similarly, electroweak, like you already said, bosons, weak bosons can also appear there. It can also influence the precision of the electron. So that can also add to the G factor. Similarly, there are hadrons are there. Other kinds of particles are there. So you can consider all kinds of particles interaction with the electrons can be added. So this calculation can be very, very precise, and the theoretical calculation can be used in it. Then the theory predicted or the standard model predicted the value of the G factor of the electron is this much. Here I have written there are 3 uncertainties. The first uncertainty inside the bracket is 11, which is coming from the uncertainty is coming from the quantum electrodynamics calculation. The second uncertainty which I have written here is coming from the hadronist calculations uncertainty. And the third uncertainty, which is slightly larger, which is coming from the so-called fine structure constant calculations. So you can see that the fine structure, which is basically giving the entire expressions, one can actually write in terms of the different orders of the fine structure constant alpha. So therefore, the value of the corrected factor is very crucially depends on the determinant fine structure constant. So therefore, one can really explain the theoretical predicted value, which is actually now in matching with the experimental result. So experiments and theories are matching for the contributions of the QED calculation to the G factor of the electron. Julian Zwickner later awarded Nobel Prize in Physics in 1965. So therefore, the G factor is the derivative from the factor 2 is an established fact. It's a very well precise measurement so far done in the physics. Therefore, there is no doubt about the calculation done by using the field theory calculations. So there's a less room for to doubt in the theory because they have done a very precise theoretical calculation, very precise measurement. Both are exactly matching. Therefore, beyond any doubt, the value of the G factor beyond 2 is electron is established fact. Now, instead of putting the experiment electron, now we can replace it with the muon. So muon also we are putting in a magnetic field. It should also be precise. So this precision, initially people observe that the value is a derivative from the 2. So we can similarly, we can also understand the G factor of the muon. So G factor of the muon, it can have a contribution coming from the quantum electrodynamics combination because the electron and the muons are the same charges. Therefore, the same kind of the feature should be also should be expected from the quantum electrodynamics corrections to the muon also. Similarly, the electroweak interaction also should contribute. And there is other properties called Hadron vacuum polarization. Why we are called vacuum polarization? Because the particles are antiparticles. That's what here mean by the polarization. So this polarization means one is particle, other one is antiparticle. But these are not separated into physically a longer distance, which will disappear momentarily. Therefore, we are using the terminology called vacuum polarization. The other term which I put HLBL, which is coming from the hardonic contribution. There are certain kind of light bosons or light photons can also interact with the hardons, and that interactions can also sometimes contribute to the G factor or magnetic moment of the muons. So therefore, one can theoretically estimate what will be the G factor, or now we are G factor, we are directly understanding in terms of the anomalies factor A mu. So therefore, a discussion is focusing on the factor A mu. So A mu, which is the dipole moment, is the anomaly dipole magnetic moment, which is computed based on the quantum theory calculation, which is again a very precise calculation. All possible particle which can appear in the standard model particles can be taken into consideration, how it can interact with the muons. Then one can calculate the corresponding interaction. So each interaction here one can represent in terms of Feynman diagrams. If you consider the other Feynman diagrams, it's much more complicated. So therefore, to understand getting this number A mu, we need more than 13,000 Feynman diagrams. It is a very complicated calculations, but it is done very precisely. It's an incredible calculation done by more than 175 scientists across the world. Without any doubt, without any kinds of mistake, they have checked several times, cross-checked by several groups and individuals across the world, and they, without any beyond the doubt, confirmed that this is the actual theoretical standard model predicted value of the A mu value or magnetic dipole anomaly factor of the muons. There is no doubt in that one. Such a precise calculation done by people. And we may doubt whether we missed any kind of an additional interaction which is supposed to be come from the standard model particles. No. All kind of possible interactions are taken, considered actually. Nothing left. Therefore, the value according to standard model prediction, the A mu of muon must be this much only. Now, how do you measure this one? We can measure the magnetic dipole moment of muon. To measure that one, we need a definitely source for muons, because muons, we said it is only a short-lived particle. It is 2.2 microseconds only, it's a lifetime. So we need a source for muon. It should supply muon continuously for the experiment. And second one, we need to measure the precision of muons, we need is a magnetic field. The moment you put the muon in an external magnetic field, you start a precision or spinning additional rotation. So we need an external magnetic field, and we need a facility to store the muon for some point of time, at least for the time which are going to observe the muon properties, precision property. So normally we prepare, the experiments normally prepare a circular shaped kind of a magnetic arrangement, which is supposed to be generated with a superconducting magnetic case. Therefore, it can provide the magnetic field. The same magnetic field can be also used to store the muons. So here I have given the ring kind of arrangements of the magnetic field, and you can see the blue track, which is the suppose the track where the muons are supposed to be travel around the ring, magnetic ring. So this is the same type the track of the muon, same types it will be act as a storage of muons. Now, how do you measure the magnetic dipole anomaly of muons? So first we said we need a muon source. So how do you muon source be generating it? So we have seen when we introduce the muon, we observed that in the atmosphere, muons are created by the decay of the pions, particle of pions. For in this experiment, we need a antiparticle of muon, mu plus. So mu plus can be generated from the pions. So how can we create pions? Pions can be created from the proton-proton collision. When the protons collide, it can generate pions. So these pions can be used to generate muons, and muons in turn be decay into other kinds of particles. So that is the source of muons. Once we have a proton sending to another target, which is contain additional number of protons, that can give rise to pions. Pions can be decayed into muons. The decay of muons is, we already mentioned, is the weak interaction. This weak interaction is a very nice property that the moment the particles, the pions decay, it when generate the muons, it must move with a certain moment, a certain direction. But very interestingly, we can see that the muons spin will be the opposite to the direction of its motion. So that is actually one of the key features of the weak interaction. So therefore, without giving any additional kind of the physical intervention, the created muons will be polarized in a certain direction, because the pions which decay, which give us to muons are moving certain direction. Along the opposite direction, its spins will be oriented. Therefore, typically spins are all of them the same direction, opposite the direction of motion of the muons. Therefore, we can see a property called all the spins are oriented certain direction. So therefore, we can call these are polarized the beam of muon. We can have a polarized beam of muons. This polarized beam of muons can be used to experiment to determine the magnetic dipole moment. Now, how can we measure the precision of muons in the storage ring, which we are using the circular ring shape? So you already mentioned that the precision of muon, which is at a rest in a magnetic field, the corresponding spin precision frequency, and can calculate it in terms of that one. But when you are sending the muon beam inside this circle or storage magnetic ring, it is actually moving. Therefore, one has to modify that frequency, because the muons later we see that it is almost moving at the speed of the light itself. It is moving at very high speed. Therefore, one has to take into account the relativistic correction to the spin frequency. So therefore, one can take into account this spin factor frequency in terms of relativistic correction. We can get this formula. So that is slightly complicated when you compare the frequency of the muon in a static magnetic field. There is a gamma, which is basically known as the Lorentz factor. So now we have the frequency of the muon, which is moving in a certain velocity in a magnetic ring. When the muons are moving the magnetic ring, it has a certain frequency, the motion frequency around the ring. That is not the cyclotron frequency. Even though we are not using cyclotron here, the terminology just adopted to uh, call us a new name, cyclotron frequency. The cyclotron frequency or the motion of the muon around with a certain frequency, which is again related to the mass of the muon and the charge and the magnetic field. Apart from the Lorentz factor is there. That's a very key essential factor. Now we have the two frequencies. One is the muon itself is moving, or muon beam itself is moving certain frequency, that is cyclotron frequency, and along that is the precision frequency of the spin of the muons. Therefore, we can calculate the difference between the muon spin frequency and cyclotron frequency, so that we can show that it will directly related to the magnetic anomaly of the dipole moment AM. Therefore, in other sense, if you measure the difference between the frequency of the muon precession frequency and cyclotron frequency, then one can measure the magnetic dipole moment anomaly. So how do you measure? What the strategy now we can use to measure the AB? Let us briefly discuss that one. So before discussing that one, suppose assume that the G factor of the muon is exactly 2 as predicted by Dirac. In that case, the precision frequency of muon must be equal to the cyclotron frequency. So here, let's assume that the muons are moving, that the blue-green lines are represent here. That blue-green line arrow represents the momentum of the muons, which is moving that direction. On the top, I have given so-called red arrows. Red arrows represent the spin of muons. Now, if G is equal to, that is, there is no magnetic anomaly, that is a frequency, omega S must be omega C. The cyclotron frequency must be equal to the rotational frequency of the spin of the muon. That case means it will be the same along with the same direction of the magnetic moment, the same direction as that of the direction of the muon itself. So it will be something like a synchronized fashion, it is moving. In other sense, the spin is rotation is same as that of the cyclotron frequency. There is no difference. Therefore, G value must be 2. If that is the way the spin is precision is happening when the muons are moving in the magnetic ring. But if these are different, if G is greater than 2, then the spin precision frequency slightly advanced the cyclotron frequency. Here you can see that when the muons moving around that ring, sometimes the spin of precision of the muons slightly advancing compared to the direction of the momentum of the muons. Earlier it was the same phase. There was no difference between the frequencies, one and the same. But this case, you can see that different position represented have written here. So sometimes this can go and come and back and forth. So it can precise slightly a different frequency to be compared to cyclotron frequency of the muon itself. Therefore, these frequencies are different. If you can measure that difference, then one can calculate the difference. That the difference will give you the exact value of the anomalous magnetic dipole moment. Now, how to measure in experiment? What is the strategy we are using to measure this one? To measure the magnetic dipole anomaly in terms of the frequency difference between the cyclotron frequency and the precision frequency of the muon. So we assume that we generated muon beams, then muon beams are entered into the cyclotron kind of magnetic ring arrangement, but it will decay because we know the lifetime of muon is 2.2 microseconds. It will decay into positron, neutron, neutrino, electron, and anti-neutron of muon. So again, according to this decay according to the weak interaction, therefore the positron will be emitting in the direction where the spin direction of the muon. So that is another important property of the weak interaction. One can understand that the positrons will be always electron with the positive charge called a positron, which will eject in the same direction where the spin direction of the muons are oriented. So we know that when the muons are moving around the ring, magnetic ring, its spin orientation going to be different. Therefore, the rejection or the positron coming from that direction can be different. For example, in this direction, it can emit this direction. In this direction, positron can eject the direction, the spin orientation of the muon. These kids can eject this direction. These kids can eject this direction. So it depends upon the muon spin orientation. This direction, the positron ejection can be different. So therefore, if one can collect the positron. So we would like to measure the precision frequency of muon. Now, muons are decay into positron. The positrons are also moving the same direction, the spin of the muon precision spin. Therefore, if you can measure the direction in which the positrons are getting rejected, that can give rise to the information about the precision of the spin of muons. That is a strategy we use it. So this can be used in terms of the number of the positrons are collected in a certain direction, or in terms of energy it can be calculated. For example, when the positrons ejected in backward direction compared to the motion of the muon in the magnetic ring, suppose in the backward direction get rejected somewhere, it can be put the arrow in the opposite direction here. So that case, one can measure the energy of the coming positron. So that's another strategy how we are measuring the energy of the proton, positron, that we will slightly discuss later. So one can see that its energy will be slightly lower. Or if the positrons are moving the same direction, the forward direction itself, then one can see that the energy of such a positron will be slightly larger, higher value. Or this is ejecting in between backward and forward direction, the energy of such positrons will be somewhere in the middle. Therefore, if you keep on putting certain kind of detector within inside, one can keep on measuring the positrons coming from the while muons are going around the ring. And you can see that that will be can be calculated in terms of the energy itself or the number of the counts of the positrons. So that positron is supposed to follow certain kind of oscillation pattern. This oscillation pattern actually either in terms of the number of positrons or that number can be also determined in terms of the energy of the positrons. The number of positrons will be later some point of time it will give the number will be decreased because the number of muons which are actually entering into the chamber, it is some of them will be decaying. At a certain point of time, another number will get a decay. So the number will keep on decreasing. That can be sometimes one can model in terms of some exponential factor with a negative sign. Therefore, it will be slightly decreasing manner. So in other sense, the frequency difference between the spin orientation or the muon or the cyclotron frequency one can estimate in terms of this positron count with respect to the number of times which are registering that one. Of course, the positrons which are entering some detector, the detector also contain electrons. You know that positrons and interact with the electrons, it can give rise to photons. So one can actually use the photons and photon multiplier, we can use it to determine the energy or the number of positrons which is actually striking that detector. So that is the another technical strategy they are using it. Using that strategy, one can really calculate the frequency difference between the spin of the muon and cyclotron frequency. So if we can measure this kind of graph, we can obtain it, then that we can calculate the magnetic anomaly of the muon. So this is actually first tested by Brookhaven National Laboratory in US, which they done the experiment 1990-2001, and the final result they announced in 2004. So without any doubt, they could calculate, so that we are denoting the BSL Brookhaven National Laboratory, the magnetic dipole measured by that group, which you are getting this small number, which is really deviating G from the 2, which is with a uncertainty for the last 2 digits, 63, which is a 540 parts per billion. So I will explain what we mean by how precise that calculation. If you say that 540 parts per billion, what that precision means. So you can compare the A mu of muon with its standard model prediction with the BSNL calculations. So you can see the difference with that one. So you calculate that one, it will tell how much is deviating from the standard model prediction. That prediction is deviating around 3.7 sigma. Sigma is the quantity which is not, that is in statistics, the uncertainty. So the uncertainty here means that how much is that quantity is deviating from the expected value. So the expected value coming from the standard model this much, and the difference show that is 3.7 sigma. That much only it is a deviating. So this deviation is cannot be complete, say that point of time. It is really an experimental fluke or it is some other problem is coming. So this result cannot be declared a discovery, but it is give a strong indication that the magnetic dipole moment of the muons really deviating from the value 2. So let us give some brief understanding what mean the parts per million. Then only we will appreciate what is the kind of precision measurement these people have done it, why we are going to trust this kind of value. So for example, the same value which are used here to explain what is the parts per billion. So you can calculate parts per billion, which is that uncertainty number 63 divided by this number measured. You can see that we are getting 540 parts per billion. So if you want to understand that meaning, you can understand what's the meaning of 100 parts per billion. This is something, an accuracy measuring of a football ground. It's an accuracy of 10 micrometer. 10 micrometer is the less than the size of our hair. So that much accuracy one can measure the length of a football ground. That much precision accuracy, Brookhaven laboratory measured the value, the magnetic anomaly of a muon. Then we need to check it further whether the Brookhaven National Laboratory done some mistake or some statistical error. It is not a statistical error or some kind of a mistake in the measurement or some other kinds of mistake. So therefore, we need a further checking. Therefore, Fermilab decided to repeat this experiment whether to confirm the A mu values are deviating for the muons or not. Either confirm the result of Brookhaven National Laboratory or deny that fact. So in 2010, Fermilab started understanding the necessity of measuring the mu on value again, A mu anomalous value again. So for doing that one, they brought the same magnet used by Brookhaven National Laboratory, which is another interesting story to tell. How they brought from longer distance to travel to there, reset it the same magnet here. So they use the same magnet, which is already mentioned. Magnets are provided by superconducting, which kept at a temperature of minus 450 degree Fahrenheit temperature. And the magnetic field is generated by this one is roughly almost like our MRI scanning instrument which are used in the laboratory. It is 1.5 Tesla range only. And the magnetic field which is generated is extremely uniform magnetic field. That's another important property is required to measure the anomaly of the magnetic dipole moment of muons. The magnetic field should not be varying from the region to region of the ring. It was extremely uniform. This is another state of art they used to check where the magnetic field generated by the superconducting magnet is uniform in nature. The diameter of this ring is 14 meters in diameter. When you want to do the experiment, assume that the muons which are generated by the decay of the pions for a certain number of muons are actually entering for a certain point of time. So according to their estimate, their experiment, almost 2,50,000 muons enter a given point of time. But we know some of them will be get a decade. Therefore, around 5,000 muons will be really stored and keep on going around the ring again and again. And during that time, some of them also get a decay. The number of the muons can be again decrease it further in the every times of it is going further and further in the ring. So we know that the speed of the muon is 0.994 times speed of light. It's almost very close to the speed of the light. Therefore, we calculate the mean time of the muon. Then one can calculate the radius of the ring, and then you can estimate how many times or how many kilometers this muon can travel before it's going to decay completely. So one can estimate that it will goes around 30 kilometers and 370 tons per. You can make it before getting to decay. Now, let us briefly understand what the strategy they used it. So we already mentioned that we need a source for muon. So we are sending protons with high energy to a target which also contain a rich proton. They use the nickel target. So the proton-proton collision gives rise to pions. The pions will decay into muons. The muons will be pions will be decayed into muons. Muons will be moving certain direction. All it is a basically polarized beams which is entering into the ring. In that ring, this is going around again and again. Therefore, we can see that some point of time it will start a decay. It will start giving the positrons. These positrons can be determined. It can be measured in some calorimeters. There are 24 calorimeters they arranged within the ring side inside. Therefore, all the number of positrons came from the decay of muons can be counted or estimated. So one can then estimate, then one can obtain that result. That result was known as the muon oscillation plot. So you can see that the count which is on the y-axis is a number of the positrons are emitting from the muons while it's traveling around the superconducting ring, or it can already mentioned can also written in terms of the energy. The number can also is expressed in the energy of the positron. So the energy or the number of counts versus the time which is coming from out from the, so it will leads to certain kind of oscillation pattern. And we know that this oscillation pattern, one can calculate the frequency of this oscillation. That frequency of the oscillation can give us to value the omega, which is the difference between the cyclotron frequency and the spin precession frequency of the muon. So when actually they are performing this oscillation frequency cycle, which they masked with or locked with certain kind of a different kinds of timing, some fake timing they actually introduce it, because they don't want somebody just because a lot of people were observing that events or they are taking the data, and they don't want somebody simply take that data and declare that they discovered something new. Therefore, they introduced a certain kind of a time delay that were not only certain secret code to certain people only. After their measurement, they revealed the secret code and they really released the result. So therefore, in conclusion, when we measure the oscillation frequency, actually we are measuring the magnetic anomaly of the muon, so that we can calculate it. So that magnetic anomaly, now one can compare with the what are the theoretical standard model prediction. So theoretical standard model prediction give this much value. We have already observed that the Brookhaven National Laboratory observed this value, and difference was 3.7 sigma. That much difference. Now we compare the latest measurement coming from the Fermi lab, compared to the theoretical value, its value is even closer than the value obtained from the Brookhaven National Laboratory. So the deviation is 3.3 sigma. But the story is not ending there. Now we can combine, but this is one thing is that we can sure that here the new result, the new measurement made by the Fermi Lab really is supporting the measurement made by the Brookhaven National Laboratory. It is not a delay in that fact. So it is the Brookhaven result is not due to any kind of experimental artifacts or experimental error. It's a measured fact. So Fermi Lab is supporting that one. Not only supporting, if you are combining the Fermi Lab result with the Brookhaven National Laboratory result, then we can see a very, very interesting features we can get it. So that is not the world average sometimes, or an average value of the measured quantity of the anomaly of the magnetic dipole moment of muon with the Fermi Lab, you get a new number. And you can see that this will be the Fermi Lab measurement is 460 parts per billion, much more precise compared to the Brookhaven National Laboratory. So when you are combined the result, you can see that that will be even much more precise, 350 parts per billion, that of precision. Now, we have to compare this with our standard model predictions, which is came out more than 30,000 Feynman diagrams or interaction taken, all possible interaction taken to consider. That is, I said that's a well precise, highly incredible calculation, highly precise calculation. Now we are getting expert result, which is an outstanding result. The outstanding result compared to highly ridiculous, precise calculation coming from the theory. If you compare both that one, we are getting something, new kinds of indication, strong indication. Now we can see that this new result, which is going to 4.2 sigma, that is give the gap wider compared to the Brookhaven measurement and Fermilab measurement. So in the diagram, you can see that this color, which is representing the standard model predicted value, and the other color, which is representing the BSNL value and Fermi Accelerated National Laboratory there. And here the down, we have did not show the average experimental value, which is given very wide range gap between the theoretical predictions and observed value. But still, so what's the meaning of this one? So this meaning of saying that the beyond any doubt, muon G factor is more than 2. See, beyond factor G more than 2, it is more than what the standard model particle predicted. According to that prediction, it is supposed to precision with a certain frequency only. Now the new measurement shows that it is precision much slightly higher than what the standard model predicted. So what even the extra precision is coming? Where from it is coming? And who is responsible for that? No fundamental other particles are responsible for it. Then who is providing that extra push to that one? Or in other sense, what is the extra wobbling which you are seeing in the case of the rotation or the precision of the muon? Who is responsible for that? No way you can explain with any kind of standard model particles interact with that one. So which means that something else also must be acting or determining the extra bubbling of muons. This can happen because you can see that compared to the electron, why it is not happening with the electron? This is much extra wobbly because electron mass is 200 times less than the mass of muon. Therefore, one can expect that muons can have a much more sensible to such kind of interaction than compared to electron. They are compared to electron wobbling, the muon bubbling much larger because the mass is 200 times larger, higher. Therefore, it can actually sense that interaction. Therefore, it is expected that it can possess an extra wobbling. But this extra wobbling cannot explain with any non-fundamental particle or in any non-form of force. So who is then pushing it? Is an indication of something else? Then again we doubt whether are we missing any kind of a theoretical estimation or calculation to which we forgot to add to the estimated standard model calculations. Again, answer is no, because you have done very precise calculation taking into account all kind of possible interactions. So therefore, this is the number we are expecting theoretically. But this is much more incredible, precise measurement coming from the Fermi lab. So you cannot doubt that measurement also, because it is also complementary some sense Brookhaven National Laboratory experiment also. Therefore, this forces to think that some things go beyond the standard model predictions. Either a new fundamental particle may be appearing in the vacuum polarization case. That is possibly the reason for extra wobbling or extra spinning frequency. Or if there is another new interesting particle which is not known so far, that should be a new fundamental particle. Its interaction could be totally different from other fundamental interactions. If that is there, it can lead to the existence of another kind of force. A new type of force can exist there. Possibly that new force you have not measured so far. Therefore, the magnetic anomaly of the muon is give a strong indication coming from the Fermilab experiment, which is 4.2 sigma, is a very strong indication for the existence of a new particle or a new force. But still, it is not a discovery. If you want to consider discovery, the sigma must be minimum 5. That's called a golden value. Then only we can really say that it's a really discovery of no. But this is a very strong indication. Therefore, it is encouraging to particles people to do experiments further. More interestingly, the Fermi lab is not revealed the complete measurement. Some part of they revealed it now. Why they decided to reveal it on April 7th, exact the same month, 21 days before. They measured and they declared, because this is giving a very, very strong indication that needs to be told the rest of the scientific community. So therefore, other people can also really search it, and the full data probably come 2022. That will probably make some kind of a conclusion along with other ongoing experiment in the world in future, can say whether we have a new additional particle or particles or force may exist there or not. So then what is this interesting thing? Interesting is that it will add one more particle in the standard model of particle, which need a definite certain kind of explanation. And possibly I mentioned that it can be added to certain kind of force. For a cosmologist, how this is interesting the cosmology people. So in cosmology, we know that apart from the ordinary matter, there is another matter called dark matter also associated with the galaxies. This is another observation fact. The idea of the dark matter is started from 1930, which I am not going to the details. Later, people, Vera Rubin and the Oystaker, Pebbles, etc., they later confirmed that even the dark matter associated or dark halo associated with our own Milky Way. So beyond any doubt, the existence of dark matter also proved it. Otherwise, it must violate the Newton's law. Right? Therefore, there will be existence of dark matter, but we don't know what the dark matter means. We don't have any candidates for dark matter. Whether this new particle can be a candidate for dark matter, we don't know. We need a lot of experiment. Therefore, this is given another a possibility of the dark matter interpreted in terms of new particle or the which may be appearing in the new experiment coming from the Fermi lab. Another consequence in cosmology, why we are interested in this experiment, very interestingly, very recently we know that the universe is supposed to accelerate. According to the standard model of cosmology, the current universe supposed to decelerate. Its expansion rate should be come down. But on the contrary, based on the supernova, which is some type of explosion of the stars, one can calculate the luminosity and the distance. There is something called luminosity distance relationship. One can calculate it. So using the luminosity distance relationship, or the luminosity, one can determine the distance towards that object from us. So using that principle, they estimated the distance of the supernova. But the very interesting what they found that the supernova luminosities keep on diminishing further and further at a certain rate. So that is given indication that the universe must be accelerating. So the universe is accelerating. We need certain kind of additional explanation, which normally within standard model cosmology cannot explain. So when I say standard model, you don't confuse the standard model of particle physics and standard model of cosmology. Standard model of cosmology based on Einstein relativity and a cosmological principle. So combining that with something called the cosmological constant, then it gives indication that the universe must be accelerated at a certain rate. And for accelerating, we need some additional mechanism, an additional particles must be a response or force must be a response for it. So we dubbed such kind of thing is called a dark energy. So therefore, we don't know what is a dark energy, like a dark matter. The dark energy is there that is actually responsible for the current accelerating phase of the universe. Or if the muon experiments say that we are finding a new force, so instead of dark energy, can this new force can be responsible for current accelerating phase of the universe? Because there are people doubting the existence of dark energy. So if you really estimate the cosmic budget, we know that 69% of the universe composed of dark energy, 26% composed of dark matter. What you are observing is just a 5% only. The dominant role of the universe dynamics determine the dark energy. The dark energy, I said, we have no candidates right now. If this, some of the new particles appearing, that experiment is a candidate for dark energy, or it is giving the new kinds of force. That is responsible for the acceleration other than the gravity. Therefore, pondering the magnetic anomaly of the muon is giving a very, very interesting and exciting result, which is really excited the scientific community, especially physics and particularly particle physics and cosmologists, because it can provide certain puzzles which are faced so far in history. Hopefully that the new measurement, new confirmation or the magnetic anomaly measurement in future can give some clues the existence of the fundamental force which are beyond the force. Therefore, I'm justifying why I given the title in my talk, why we are talking about beyond the fantastic four. So with this remarks, I quote from a very famous quote from a person, Henry Pinner. All those who lived or spent searching for truth are well aware that the glimpses they catch of it are necessarily fleeting, glittering for an instant only, to make way for new and still more dazzling insight. And thank you for your patience and listen to me. I stop my talk. Thank you once again.
Um, Thank you, Dr. Suresh, for your brilliant exposition of a topic of our interest beyond the Fantastic Four. You have been uh, really, you have justified your proposition with a scholarly presentation. You started actually locating the anomaly factor in the standard model with reference to the magnetic momentum anomaly of the muons, then presented the quantum corrections, especially with the reference to the recent result published by Fermilab. And it's been highlighted that in spite of the theoretical, well, the precisions in the results, uh, in spite of the precisions in the results, there exists discrepancy between the theoretical predictions and the measurements observed. So how to rectify this? What is the reason behind this? Good many questions you have posed. You know, the possibility of an existing new force, new particle, and the cosmological implications for dark matter and dark energy, and the concept of accelerating universe. So very many questions for research. So I'm sure that this would definitely inspire many students to engage in serious research in future. Thank you so much for this presentation. Now it's the open hour for everyone present here. You are most welcome to respond to the presentations. You can present your comments, your ask questions, or interact with Dr. P.K. Suresh. You are most welcome. And students, I repeat, you can also ask or discuss future areas of research. He has already indicated a couple of areas. So thank you, Dr. P.K. Suresh, and over to the floor is open for discussion.
Thank you.
First may I call upon Dr. K. Babu Joseph, the principal advisor of this Libby Science Forum, to comment. Yes.
First of all, let me congratulate Dr. P.K. Suresh on his excellent survey of a crisis that has been brewing in particle physics over the last couple of years. From experience, we know that whenever there is a crisis, there will be a resolution, and that leads to new knowledge, the birth of new knowledge. If you examine the history of development of physics, this proposition is amply confirmed. We are at the threshold of some important developments in our understanding of the universe. Which way we should go, we don't know. Nobody knows. Whether it is in terms of Bohr interactions, the standard models of tinkering with the standard model, or extending it by including new particles, fifth force, and so on. All that is being contemplated on the assumption that space-time is four-dimensional. Maybe if we consider extra dimensions, one could explain this anomaly. I don't know. Another possibility, as Suresh has mentioned, is bring dark matter or dark energy into mainstream physics. That is a far more ambitious proposal, which cosmologists like Suresh should be able to contribute to. I I don't want to ask any questions because I want to leave the floor to the younger members of the fraternity of science. Let them raise questions. Let them seek answers, explanations, so that they may take us further in exploration, in exploring nature. Wish you all the best, Suresh.
Thank you, sir.
And I conclude.
Well, thank you, Dr. Babu Joseph. Anybody, you are welcome. Researchers, participants, students, teachers, you are welcome.
Good morning, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah, yeah.
Good evening, Suresh sir. Your very nice talk we heard this evening. So it is very fantastic talk from particle physics basics we heard after a long time, and it will connect it to cosmology. Sir, that fifth force is existing, or what is your viewpoint of view, and how it is the cosmology? It will helpful in the new area of the physics.
Yeah. See, so far we don't have any conclusive evidence for the existence of fifth force. These are still only some kind of indications coming from this kind of experiments. So if fifth force is there, then possibly it can explain the current accelerating phase of the universe, along with the explanation of the additional precision of muons, and probably certain other things which are not explored so far. We can explore as far as we don't know, because so far we are using only the four fundamental forces to explore, understanding nature. If you get one more force, that is another tools to explore the universe, understand in much better way. So therefore, the discovery of such a new force, understand the features of the force, will be helpful to understand even better understanding of the universe, nature, and it can also provide a better technology, because to establish a new fundamental force, we need a certain kind of new kinds of interaction that can probably lead to new kinds of technology. So we know that any kinds of such a byproducts can be really usable to the welfare of the human beings at the very large.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh, and thank you, Venkat, for the question. And the floor is open.
Hello.
Yes, Anthony Joseph, you are welcome.
The muon is a charged particle and it is moving with almost the velocity of light. So
Yes.
how is the relativistic correction taken into account in this case?
So that actually already mentioned in my talk, that latest correction which is moving around that superconducting magnet, we corrected the frequency with latest correction. So that one factor, if you remember, there's something called Lorentz factor, we take into that consideration, then we consider the motion of the muon around the magnetic ring. Okay, that's already taken into consideration, relativistic effect. Okay. Unless we take relativistic corrections effect, we cannot really calculate the precision frequency of the muons. Yeah, we'll take into account that one. Yes.
Good evening, sir. It's very great to hear your talk. So in this regard, I just want to ask. So far, you are seeing an anomaly, right?
Yes.
So apart from thinking like there exists a fundamental like a force or any other unknown physics, what do you think about the possibilities that there might be a natural space-time correction, or like how it can be corrected with our understanding about the space-time itself, given that it's a decomposition, given that the decomposition is also happening over these anomalies?
It's a very, very interesting question. Like, so when you said that, the beginning itself, when we introduced the standard model particle, I mentioned that one important force actually really missing in the standard model of particle, that's called gravity or gravitons, if you quantize them. So far we have not taken into consideration or the quantum or gravity effects. So if at this level, if you want to calculate, we need something called quantum gravity. So therefore, if you want correction for the quantum gravity effects, in other sense, the way you mentioned, we need a space-time. The quantum gravity space-time or quantum gravity space-time, quantum features of space-time should be also taken into consideration. So whether we don't know such a quantum feature, the space and time really influence the spin precision of muon. So right now we don't have the answer to that one. It is another very even much more complicated calculation compared to the what the calculation done by the using the quantum field the calculations, which was because calculating with the quantum field theories in that sense much easier compared to the taking into account the quantum gravity corrections. It's a much more an open problem, very complicated issue, maybe involve a lot of mathematical techniques are required, or the some of the available techniques itself may not be useful to calculate them. We need additional measures and all the things. So this is an open and very challenging problem. We can also prove the quantum gravity effects also. Therefore, it has a very good consequence, and it required a lot of young minds intervention required to do a lot of work. So a lot of genuine problems are waiting to unfold the magnetic anomaly of muons. Not only particle physics point of view, there's a quantum gravity point of view. A lot of ample questions we are going to post it very soon, and we are going to solve it. Maybe not in nearby future. Sometimes in future, some of you may be going to resolve that issue. Yeah, this is basically quantum correction of space-time.
Yeah, Professor Suresh, it was an excellent talk. It has some nostalgic value for me too. I am no more a physicist, but when I started research for my first PhD, it was in quantum field theory. Anyway, that's another story why I had to deal with it. But I think that this your talk should be of great motivating value for our young scientists. I think we are going to put it in YouTube and they should listen to it. We are talking 2-3 things about your talk. Let me highlight. One is that the precision with which you describe the experiment. It's very important to know what you are doing and the exact element of error that is possible, by which you can rule out certain things and by which a theory can be compared with the experimental results. Second thing I would say is that I suppose the young students here who are listening to Professor Suresh should get guidance from him as to see one important issue about PhD or research is to get a good problem. So what are the possible good avenues for research from this? Especially I'm thinking about the Indian scientists here, Indian students here, who they can look at whether theoretical or experimental, and which, so this is, as Professor Babu Joseph said, this is, we are at a very important, interesting juncture of physics. Because as he said, the margin of error for this result is very low. Therefore, it may lead to something big, which can then, will influence not only particle physics, but the cosmology, all of physics actually, all of universe really. Second thing I would also ask, we mentioned, I think somebody asked and you mentioned about quantum gravity. I'm just wondering whether the string theories, there's a lot of work going on in that area, whether the string theories and the string theory researchers, will they be interested in using their theory to explain this? I don't know, just speculating. Anyway, thanks a lot for interesting, very interesting and very exciting. I mean, after a long time, I hear something at the cutting edge of physics, cutting edge of fundamental science. So thank you, Suresh. Wish you all the very best. I hope you also come out with some very important, interesting discovery, which can fetch you a Nobel Prize, and we'll be all proud of you for that. Thank you.
Thank you for your valuable comments and suggestions. And I'd like to respond to your query regarding the string theory calculations, whether taken into account or not. So if you take there are some attempts going on to account the anomaly can be accounted from the string theory calculations or not. But if string theory is correct, then there should exist some other kinds of extra particle, something called a supersymmetric particle that's supposed to exist. But unfortunately, the CERN experiment, the LHC experiment, completely ruled out existence of any kind of supersymmetric particles. Therefore, the influence of such supersymmetric particles to the calculation of the precision anomaly of the muon is at time being it is ruled out. But still, the serious work is still going on, such kind of corrections. Hopefully, that can also tell whether the string theory will be correct or not. And one of the things I would like to comment on the Indian students or scientists, how we can do this kind of cutting edge technological research. One of the problems which are facing in India that we don't have, really speaking, world-class facilities and available in India, where the students from Japan or US or European countries, even the public have access to the world-class facilities. The childhood own ways, then they are seeing such a fundamental world-class facilities. It is a natural motivation to at least go nearby such kind of facility and do it. They do have such kind of a world-class facilities in India. So if you want to do it, people have to go to Japan, Europe or America, then you can see such kind of facilities. So we can provide in-house world-class facilities that can really motivate younger generations. And it can get a genuine ideas can be rooted from the India itself. Why we are not? Because the people like they're saying the Suez Canal, how much engineering, amazing facts they are seeing their life. We don't know such a kind of amazing facts one can see in India. So we have to create such kind of ambience and facilities, world-class facilities in India, so that it can come out certain kind of a very good genuine research can also rooted from India. I'm sure that if you create such kind of world-class facilities, and we have very fantastic scientists and very high caliber students across India. The only problem that we are not getting a proper exposure and proper guidelines and proper facilities, the proper adequate funds are not available. There's also something like we have a handicap certain ways. I'm not going to criticize who is responsible for it. Okay, we know for the answer some extent. So if we can create that kind of ambience in India, then only we can expect, I think, some kind of a new Nobel Prize in India. We hope that some of us still keep on working with our own limitations and other things. But there are a lot of young generation have very big scope on, because I know several very potential talented students are in India. But unfortunately, some of the world can go abroad. Most of them are remaining in India. Can we provide the facilities, world-class facilities? We may reach to a level. Why can't we do the G-2 kind of experience in India? It does not require that kind of big investment to do that one. Along that, how much technology we can improve it. Industrial technology, electronics technology, software technology, mechanical technology, lot of medical technology, commercial products, all things. All things are inviting in India. Unless we really put some money and investment, the all kind of overall development will be difficult for India. I think we can keep on discussing this one. For time, I think it's
Thank you.
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other clarification or question or query that will be appreciated? Well, there is a message in which Dilip asks, can you give us some sources for future reference?
Future?
Reference. Maybe
Yeah, I can give you the future reference. Actually, you can search in Google the muon G-2 experiment. You will get a lot of technical details. Otherwise, same day, a lot of general materials are available. Just search the G-2 experiment. You will get a lot of them.
Okay.
So you can maybe, I have not provided my email address, and maybe you can borrow from Professor Binoy later, and you can mail me. I can definitely mail to you. And a lot of materials are available. Some of them are highly technical.
Yeah. Thank you.